This is an LA Times Studios podcast.
Chris Goffard here at LA Times Studios. Thanks for joining us on Crimes of the Times. Today's episode is about a preschool in Manhattan Beach that became the focus of the largest sex abuse criminal trial in American history. Tell us what you think in the comments below. The stories being told by the children of McMartin Preschool in Manhattan Beach were blood-curdling and bizarre. They spoke of being sexually molested by staff and subjected to demonic rituals. They spoke of trapdoors, of secret chambers, of tunnels beneath the school. Parents in the affluent South Bay city had entrusted their kids to the school and the McMartin family that ran it for years. Now, hundreds of kids described some form of abuse. Some said they were sodomized, photographed naked, forced to watch animals slaughtered, and threatened with death if they told anyone.
There were more kids coming forward and more evidence, and it went from one lawyer to two lawyers from the prosecution to three lawyers from the prosecution because it just kept growing. It takes on a life of its own at that point.
This is Glenn Stevens, one of the LA prosecutors at the preliminary hearing in 1984. The heart of the prosecution's case was a series of videotapes that captured the kids, who ranged from 4 to 10 years old, being interviewed by Children's Institute International, a Los Angeles therapy center. The kids were given puppets and anatomically correct dolls to describe the alleged sex abuse they suffered.
I started watching the tapes in order of when we were going to start calling the witnesses to the stand, because that would be the logical way to do it.
What he saw startled him. He realized that the kids' stories were growing more elaborate as the interviews progressed.
In the most simplistic and direct way, it would be, don't you want to be a brave boy? The question would be, don't you want to be a brave boy? And tell us about what happened to you. Yeah, but nothing happened to me. Most of them would start out that way. Well, we talked to this child, we talked to Billy, who said that you were in his class and that this happened to him, and we wanted to, they would feed information, the interviewers would feed information to the kids, and they would then start feeding information about some of the other teachers as time went on.
So something was fundamentally rotten about the questioning procedure.
Questioning procedure was basically not a questioning procedure, but it was a dictation. The interviewer was dictating what happened, and the kids didn't even have to answer. They could just nod using a puppet, and that was an affirmative response.
The McMartin Preschool case was one of the biggest sex abuse stories of the 1980s and became the longest criminal trial in American history.
But in hearing testimony, cross-examination especially, from the defense, it occurred to me that I was missing a lot of information that they were getting. So I started looking at them in a different way because I was missing something.
From LA Times Studios, this is Crimes of the Times. I'm Christopher Goffard. Manhattan Beach is a beautiful and wealthy town just 2.5 miles long in the South Bay of Los Angeles County.
It's kind of the dream Southern California town.
I'm talking to Kevin Cody, who publishes the newspaper Easy Reader, which covers Manhattan Beach. He followed the McMartin preschool molestation trial extensively, knowing it would be the biggest story of his career.
Martin had a very good reputation. Virginia McMartin received the Rose and Scroll Award, which is like Citizen of the Year.
And she's the founder.
She's the founder, and she still worked at the school, and her daughter pretty much managed it. But it was hard to get into. I mean, it's a small school. It only had, 35 students or so. It was a popular school.
In 1983, a woman named Judy Johnson began making claims that would trigger mass panic and eventually put the school at the center of the longest criminal trial in American history, as well as the biggest sex abuse case in the annals of the American courts. Judy Johnson told police that a teacher had molested her 2-year-old son at the school. Her claims became increasingly bizarre. Soon she said the abuse had involved sacrificial altars, candles, a decapitated baby, an airplane flight, and a figure called the Goat Man. Spurred by Johnson's complaint, police arrested 25-year-old teacher Raymond Buckey, grandson of the preschool's founder, and they sent letters to 200 current and former McMartin parents. Please question your child to see if he or she has been a witness to any crime or if he or she has been a victim. Oral sex, fondling of genitals, buttock or chest area, and sodomy possibly committed under the pretense of taking the child's temperature. Also, photos may have been taken of children without their clothing. As this letter got around, panic engulfed parents, and the district attorney's office began referring families to the therapists at Children's Institute International, CII. CII's techniques were controversial. Kids were given anatomical dolls and encouraged to use puppets, such as Pac-Man, to communicate what was otherwise unspeakable. They were presented with lurid and grotesque scenarios and told that their classmates had already divulged, quote, yucky secrets. When the kids insisted they were not victims, the social workers kept pressing. The Institute said 360 of the McMartin kids reported abuse. Children had spoken of being taken to secret rooms and tunnels, of being tied up and forced to play a game called Naked Movie Star. They spoke of mutilated animals and satanic rites. One veteran child abuse prosecutor articulated the article of faith underpinning the case. No amount of questioning can make a child believe what he doesn't believe. In March 1984, Robert Filibosian, in the thick of a campaign to keep his job as district attorney of Los Angeles County, filed charges of child molestation against teacher Raymond Buckey and 6 women, Buckey's sister, his mother, his 76-year-old grandmother, and 3 other teachers. A prosecutor alleged that it was a conspiracy involving, quote, millions of items of child porn.
Initially, I just assumed they were guilty.
This is Kevin Cody again, the Easy Reader publisher.
Who was I to dispute this mountain of evidence?
What was the mood in the city during that period?
People were very upset. I mean, it was a very tense. There was, the sheriffs spent $1 million on an investigation that lasted about a year. There were talks from the pulpit. There were meetings. There was a preschool set up for just McMartin preschool students. There was actually a property tax assessed that would pay for the preschool to help these kids. The whole community kind of mobilized in support of these kids with bumper stickers that read, "Believe the children." There was no similar movement for the defendants, and you can kind of understand why.
With the McMartin case in the news, a half dozen other preschools in the South Bay area were shut down amid allegations of child abuse, though authorities repeatedly failed to find proof. Cody spoke to Kee McFarland, the CII therapist whose interviews underpin the McMartin case and who came to be known as the Puppet Lady. She seemed to have total faith in the way she questioned the children, even though the resulting stories were horrific.
She was a very well-intended, very sweet, motivated, sincere, distressed at having discovered what she felt she had discovered. She said, "This is not what I wanted to find out." She was completely taken in by her own interviewing techniques.
And I said, now why here and why now? Why suddenly do we have 7 preschools that are accused of molestation? And she actually said, well, they just sort of have a network and they all kind of congregated down here. And I didn't really have a way to refute it, but your kind of bullshit alarms start to go off sooner or later. People don't like the term hysteria because they think they are not subject to hysteria. I mean, they don't think they would have been sucked in by the Salem witch hunts, or they don't think they would have got sucked in by the McCarthyism because we're all too smart to get sucked in. But that kind of hysteria kind of sneaks up on you and you don't realize you're being sucked in. And that's what happened in this case.
The media played a strong role in fomenting the hysteria. Newspapers and TV stations appeared to embrace the prosecution's case with little skepticism. One of the more egregious LA Times headlines was, "Brutality at McMartin School Revealed." The Times had a media critic named David Shaw who called the coverage, quote, "an echo chamber of horrors," and he did not spare his own colleagues from his harsh assessments. He wrote, quote, "On the McMartin story, most of the media didn't light a match within 3 miles of the DA's feet during the first year or two of the case."
Hi, my name is Mary, and I'm one of the producers of Crimes of the Times. I want to take a quick second to tell you a little bit about Quince. I'm wearing one of their Mongolian cashmere cardigans, and I couldn't be happier with it. Not only is it one of the most luxurious items in my closet, but it didn't break the bank because all Quince pieces are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. They're able to do that by partnering directly with top factories, cutting out the cost of the middleman, and passing the savings on to you. Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. My husband has a pair of Quince sweatpants. My baby crawls around in Quince gripper socks. I'm not lying when I say there's something for the whole family at Quince. Upgrade your closet this year without the upgraded price tag. Go to quince.com/crimesofthetimes for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's quince.com/crimesofthetimes to get free shipping and 365-day returns. quince.com/crimesofthetimes.
At the 19-month preliminary hearing, amid huge publicity, 14 former McMartin students testified. Some talked about being forced to drink rabbit's blood at the preschool. Some said they'd been taken to a cemetery to watch a corpse dug up and mutilated. One child took the witness stand and was asked to pick his supposed abusers out of a photo lineup. He pointed to 2 faces, the city attorney and action star Chuck Norris. Glenn Stevens, who was one of several prosecutors at the preliminary hearing, found his belief in the case withering as it unfolded. Despite a massive search, not a single photograph turned up suggesting a child porn ring. Stevens went out to the McMartin School with sheriff's investigators in search of corroborating evidence. But the physical layout of the school argued strongly against the claims of rampant, years-long molestation. It was a small school and highly visible, located just off one of the busiest streets in Manhattan Beach.
It had no trees or shrubbery in front to block the view of the school from the street, and it was maybe 15 yards from the sidewalk to the classrooms. So anybody could have walked from the sidewalk through the gate up to the school and not be blocked in any way from seeing what's going on inside the rooms. That, to me, was just startling. Then we got a search warrant and tore up the floor. And it was this concrete slab on the grade, which means that there's no basement. It's just basically a pour of concrete on top of dirt, and then they build on top of that. There were no trapdoors. There were no secret rooms. There were no ladders. There were no stairs. There was no elevator. There was nothing. And it became impossible as a prosecutor to be able to, with a straight face, tell a jury or even a judge that you should believe this from what the kid says, but not believe this. In other words, you should believe that they were touched, but you should not believe the fact that it was in a subterranean room. I was there when they were cracking through the floor when they were using then technology to determine what's underneath. You just get a feel for it. Where are you going to put a secret door? Let's just say there was a tunnel at the property next door and somebody says, this is the tunnel. How do you access it from the school? Kids never said that they left the school to go into the tunnels under the school. There was nothing there. It was basically a floor, walls, windows, and a door to the outside.
Stephen said that Judy Johnson, whose report about her son launched the case, showed signs of paranoia and mental instability and refused to let him interview her son. Among her more unhinged allegations, an AWOL Marine had sodomized the family dog. Johnson was found dead in December 1986 of an alcohol-related illness, just before she was expected to testify. Then there were the videotapes, hundreds of interviews conducted by Children's Institute International. When the videos were played in court, reporters got a look at the highly suggestive methods.
These kids are just being led down a primrose path to make these accusations.
This is Kevin Cody again.
True or not true, there's no way you can make any conclusion. And, I tell people that I had a 3-year-old daughter at the time, and I said to her, came home one day and I said, "You hurt your finger?" And she said, "No." I said, "Mommy says you hurt your finger." And she goes, "Uh-huh." I said, "Did you hurt your finger?" "No." I says, "Didn't you slam it in the door?" "Uh-huh." "Did it hurt?" "Uh-huh." And I think to this day, she probably thinks she slammed her finger in the door when she was 3 years old. I mean, it was, any parent knows about this confabulation that kids do. It's really hard to make sense of what kids do.
You got her to change her story with 4 questions.
4 questions.
As Stevens watched the tapes in chronological order, noticing how the accounts became wilder and more embellished, he now realized that what had initially seemed like cross-corroboration was a clear case of cross-contamination. He thought a conspiracy among McMartin staff seemed increasingly remote. None of the McMartins had any kind of prior criminal record. He shared his misgivings with the media. This embarrassed the DA's office, and soon after he resigned. The same month in 1986, a judge decided that there was enough evidence to send all 7 defendants to trial, including school founder Virginia McMartin, who was 78 years old and confined to a wheelchair. Her grandson, Raymond Buckey, who was a teacher at the school, was accused of the most wrongdoing with 81 counts of molestation. To the outrage of McMartin parents, the new DA, Ira Reiner, dismissed charges against 5 of the defendants, calling the evidence against them, quote, incredibly weak. But Reiner allowed the case to proceed against Raymond Buckey and his mother, Peggy Buckey. Reiner told me that he should have tossed out charges against all of the defendants because the children's testimony had been so corrupted by the interviewing techniques at CII. The theory behind the interviews was that kids could be pushed and nudged because they were otherwise scared to volunteer their stories, and that the horrors they were reciting couldn't possibly be imagined. Reiner told me it resulted in planting ideas in the heads of the child witnesses. By the time the trial began in the summer of 1987, the news coverage had grown tougher-minded, but prosecutors did not relent. A pediatrician named Astrid Hager testified for the prosecution that she had found physical evidence of abuse in 10 of the alleged child victims. She was relying on controversial, quote, colposcopic evidence, magnified scars alleged to show sexual abuse. Defense attorneys maintained that the scarring could have gotten there by other means. They portrayed colposcopic evidence as junk science and Hager as a biased witness who owed her reputation to the McMartin case. In the prosecution's hands, Raymond Buckey's quirks were presented as potentially sinister. He was a big believer in pyramid energy. He slept with a big pyramid over his bed and sold pyramid-shaped hats at a UFO convention.
He was surprisingly nice. He was kind of reclusive. He's an easy person to make a scapegoat of. He's a good volleyball player. But he didn't have a lot of friends, didn't have girlfriends. So he was a vacuum. And I couldn't talk to his friends because I didn't know who his friends were. He testified that he had this pyramid, he slept with the pyramid, he put his razor blades under the pyramid because he heard that they could sharpen the razor blades. But, so did a million other people here. Everybody had weird necklaces and incense and the kind of. So on its own, it really wasn't very compelling evidence. One of the other, this is how desperate the prosecution, when you look back at it, you see how desperate they were. Like, well, he must be a child abuser because he's into pyramids.
Hi, my name is Mary, and I'm one of the producers of Crimes of the Times. I wanted to take a quick second to talk about a product called Lumen. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even stress management. It's a new year, and if you're like me, you might be inspired to get a little healthier. Lumen can help with this. All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. Optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, better sleep, etc. Take the next step to improving your health. Go to lumen.me/crimesofthetimes to get 20% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/crimesofthetimes for 20% off your purchase. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode.
In January 1990, after a 30-month trial, the jury acquitted the Buckys on 52 counts, but deadlocked on 13 others. Raymond Bucky was retried, and after another deadlock, the Los Angeles County DA finally dropped the case. The McMartin case would end with 0 convictions, and McMartin would become a byword for social contagion and hysteria. The case would come to stand for the epic failure of a number of trusted institutions: law enforcement, courts, the child therapy establishment, the medical establishment, and the media. The estimated cost to taxpayers was $15 million. The Buckys' business had been destroyed, and the damage to their names was permanent. Raymond Bucky and his sister are still alive, and I tried to reach them, but through a friend they declined to be interviewed. I talked to a professor at UC Irvine, Zoe Klemfus, who researches children's eyewitness testimony. She told me the McMartin case spurred a lot of research and dramatic improvements in child interviewing protocols. She said it's now widely accepted that, quote, we can get kids to say all kinds of things that aren't true just by showing them what we want them to say. Few of the now grown-up McMartin children have spoken publicly, but some have described the pressure to fabricate stories or disbelieve innocent memories in favor of traumatic ones. One accuser, Kyle Zerpolo, was 8 years old when he spoke to CII therapists in 1984. Later, he admitted that the stories he told about McMartin teachers, including the claim that kids were stripped and photographed, were not false memories but fabrications. He told the journalist Debbie Nathan that he hoped to win the love and attention of the adults around him, and he grasped what they wanted him to say. Zerpolo said, I would try to think of the worst thing possible that would be harmful to a child. And he conjured, quote, satanic details by imagining his own family church. He went on to say, from going to church, you know that God is good and the devil is bad and has horns and is about evil and red and blood. I just throw a twist in there with Satan and devil worshiping.
I remember having fun there. I specifically remember the wooden, there was an octopus seesaw.
This is Maureen Flanagan, a Los Angeles-based documentary filmmaker.
And They had a bunch of kind of homemade wooden toys in there and a slide, and they had a garden, and it was a small little place, but I only remember positive experiences there.
Flanagan attended McMartin when she was 5 years old and calls herself an unwitting victim of the case. Years after she left the school, when she was about 10 and the investigation was underway, her parents came to pick her up.
They said, we're going to go downtown and you're going to, a nice lady wants to interview you about your time at McMartin Preschool.
She remembers the nice lady as Kee McFarlane, the CII social worker who became known as the Puppet Lady during the case.
And the room was like full of stuffed animals and just, children's toys and things like that.
Maureen was given an Officer McGruff puppet and anatomic dolls. Maureen kept saying that nothing bad had happened at the preschool, but her denials were interpreted as fear and repression. She got the feeling that if she didn't give the nice lady what she wanted to hear, she was not getting out of that room. The questions started veering into the bizarre.
It was something like, some kids said that there were animal sacrifices. It was something around that. And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, did you ever see anything like that? And I said, no. And she said, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think I'd remember something like that. They kept repeating questions to the point where it was clear to me that they wanted a specific answer. And then the conversation kept getting weirder. It turned sexual. It turned to telling me that kids were reporting that the teachers were doing inappropriate things with the children, and she was being very explicit about it and introducing ideas to me that I had never heard of, as a 10-year-old. And I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. And basically, my head was exploding because I was with strangers. I was extremely shy. They were talking about sexually explicit stuff that I was too embarrassed to even talk to my parents about. And it just got really uncomfortable, and I just remember wanting to get the hell out of there.
At age 10, Maureen was twice as old as many of the other kids that were being interviewed. If it was uncomfortable for her, and if she was vulnerable to the therapist's pressure, imagine how the much younger kids experienced it.
And there was this silence that I went into this interview. I wasn't told why. And then I left, and we didn't talk about it again. And I was left believing, obviously, something was wrong with me, because why? I had to figure it out for myself.
Maureen says that despite her denials during that interview, CII told her parents that she had, quote, most likely been abused. She came to believe that she had been, and it haunted her for decades.
And for me, I spent into my mid-20s wondering if I had been molested and kind of defaulting to this idea, I guess I was. My mother even believed it.
When she got to college, she told her mother that she didn't think the McMartin people had done anything to her at all.
She looked at me and she said, and with the look of, you've been diagnosed with cancer and you're denying it kind of a look. It's like, yeah, I know, but it happened kind of a thing. And I completely hated the therapeutic community until I went back to figure out, ironically, had I been molested or not. I believed I was molested till I went to therapy again, 20 years later, and had anxiety, panic attacks in intimate relationships that I would, suddenly have something would trigger me and I would have flashbacks of something horrendous happening. And there was a cone of silence around the whole thing that kind of baked in the idea for myself as a 10-year-old that I guess I'm broken, something did happen to me, because no one's talking about it. And so I carried shame. I had a lot of shame around it.
Maureen Flanagan has been developing a documentary on the McMartin case and the experience of the kids who lived through it. Like her, they're in their 50s now.
like, if all of us kids go on the record, then we can kind of look at the numbers. Out of 400, how many believe that it happened and how many don't believe it happened? There's been no ability to do a study about the effects of especially this specific case because all of our names are sealed, and it only comes forward if we come forward now.
Many have talked to her off the record, but no one will go on camera. One of their common explanations is that they do not want to seem to be denying the experience of people who believe something did happen.
And denying them their belief is somehow in bad faith and a terrible thing to do. And I think that's fascinating. Like this seal of protection, this gatekeeping. There's a lot of gatekeeping around it. And people also just don't want to talk about it anymore. It was so tragic and upsetting for so many years that they just want to die in peace, basically.
Kevin Cody told me that many of the 400 or so families affected by the McMartin case still live in Manhattan Beach, but they don't talk about the McMartin case.
Yeah, the parents be in a rock and hard spot. If they think their kids are abused, that's pretty bad. If they think their kids weren't abused, but they treated them as if they'd been abused for years, that's not good either.
At times, people say the legal system never definitively proved that all of the allegations were bogus, a position that makes Cody bristle.
Yeah, I get furious with people who say we'll never know, because we do know. There was $14 million spent. There was over 100 witnesses. You and I could be guilty of really heinous crimes, and the world would never know because we've never had our lives examined. But the Buckies, their lives are turned upside down. There is not a minute in their lives that has gone unexamined, and they came out of it without a blemish. Not the coolest, most functional family, but they were not criminals. And anyone who says otherwise, or anyone who says they don't have a way to know, is being dishonest or is just uninformed. The Bucky family tried to sue for defamation. There was one parent who continued to go on talk shows saying they're guilty. And so they sued him for defamation. They won the lawsuit, and the judge ruled they were not entitled to damages because they had no reputation to damage left.
Cody reminds me that the parents swept up in the case were well-educated people. Manhattan Beach was a city of professionals, engineers, doctors, lawyers.
Yeah, no, these weren't naive people. I mean, when, my shorthand explanation, why would people think this? The police told them it was guilty. The DA told them they were guilty. The grand jury said the defendants were guilty. The doctors said the defendants were guilty. The therapists said the defendants were guilty. And who are you, even if you're a parent and you have this child who went to the preschool who seems perfectly normal, to say, nah, couldn't happen to my child.
From LA Times Studios, this is Crimes of the Times. To read more about these cases, check out Crimes of the Times at latimes.com. We also have a link to our video episodes in the show notes. This episode was written and reported by me, your host, Christopher Goffard. Our showrunner and senior producer is Jacqueline Kim. Executive editor is Cindy Chang. Production assistant is Jordan Patterson. Production services provided by JTB Studios. Our camera technicians and operators are Jeff Amlott, Julia McCabe, and Jason Newbert, with additional production support from Andrew Gombert, Patrick Stewart, and Anne-Marie Hauser. Denise Callahan is our studio manager. Ben Church is our production manager. Special thanks to LA Times Studios President Anna Magzanian, President and Chief Operating Officer of the Los Angeles Times, Chris Argenteri, and Executive Editor of the Los Angeles Times, Terry Tang. Crimes of the Times is executive produced and co-created by Derek Sean, and me, Christopher Goffard.